So last week, when I first heard that Blizzard was shutting down this classic WoW server, Nostalrius, I was actually fine with it. I didn't care, because generally speaking, I'm against piracy. Talked about it in the past, just as a general thumb. I think that if you want to play a product, you should pay for it because money went into developing it, right? And, you know, we're not here to have that argument about piracy because I understand the other points of view. I get that games aren't available in some parts of the world, that depending on where you live, it might take 2 weeks to a month worth of income to purchase the game at a traditional retail price. I also get that people want to try games before they buy them because they felt like they've been burned in the past. I understand all of those points of views. It's just, generally speaking, I disagree with piracy. But I've thought more about this particular instant, and this is different. Because people aren't not paying for a game that they could pay for. You can't pay to play vanilla WoW. It's not an option. And while it's technically the same game, it is a different experience. The WoW that you have today and all of its iterations and updates is much, much different than what vanilla WoW was in a few key aspects. 2 of them that I'm going to talk about in this video. And I guess let's just jump into it. One of the main things is that the community. It's different. Not that there's no community in WoW, but the sense of server-based community is much different nowadays in Warcraft than it was back in the day. And this isn't just nostalgia talking, we're gonna point to some literal differences. So quality of life changes have changed and altered the sense of community, specifically server-based community. Those rival guilds and people that you constantly meet with in the world, or those other players that you encounter when you're doing endgame stuff. That's a lot different. That's a lot different because of LFG. That's a lot different because of phasing. It's also a lot different because the leveling experience isn't as much of a challenge as it was back in vanilla. Shit was tough back then. I routinely was killed in Elwyn Forest, for God's sakes. And nowadays, every time a new WoW expansion comes out, I typically play it for a couple of months, and I don't really remember much of any challenge in the leveling experience nowadays. It's made to be a relatively smooth curve instead of you coming up against hard, insanely challenging stuff on a regular basis. Yeah, there's elite mobs and there's challenging stuff. I would say overall, though, the leveling experience is much less challenging. And with that, there's less incentive to group up. And then you've got phasing. Phasing making it so that you literally won't see people who would in the past have been around you on your server. If I am at, let's just say, Goldshire on my server, anyone else from my server who was also at Goldshire, I would see. But nowadays, with server transfer phasing and phasing depending on where you are in a quest, etc., that's no longer the case. You're not guaranteed to see someone if they're in the exact same location as you for various reasons. And then there's LFG. There used to be a period of time where it's a huge pain in the ass to get a group together. Of course, I'll admit that. It was a huge pain in the ass to get a group together. But what that also made was you sort of be immersed in this world, be forced to interact and engage with other people, try to get people to join your group, walk to the instance, and go inside of it. Instead of clicking a button, being instantly ported to the instance, and then be match-made with a group of people who might not even be on your server. These are all positive changes in that they make the game easier to play, less time-consuming, but what they end up doing as a result is sort of diminishing the idea of a server-based community. Another thing is, I think, the lack of scale, not because they haven't built the world big and interesting, but because of the existence of flying mounts. I think that particular change tore apart the sense of scale and danger in the world. It's really a lot different when you're in a portion of the world and you can just hop on your flying mount and get away, or hop on your flying mount and land directly on an objective. So those are, I think, 2 big ways, 2 hard truths that we can just point to and say, this is different now than it was back then. And we could have the argument about whether or not those changes were for the better or worse. And in my opinion, I think they're for the worst. But either way, they're different. Good or bad, they are different. And there's people who loved that game, the way that it was. And the issue with a lot of these games nowadays, these breathing and living games, and you see this mostly in MMORPGs, is that they'll change over time and you can never go back to how it was because there aren't options for that. Enter private servers, giving an option for that. And this particular private server that Blizzard has decided to shut down, Nostalrius, they weren't making any money. So it's not like these people were taking someone else's product and profiting off of it. They weren't stealing money away from Blizzard. But then you could point to the fact that there's people who are playing on these servers who aren't then paying to play on Blizzard's official servers. That's a legitimate argument I could see people having. Yeah, man, if these people weren't playing for free here on Nostalrius or any of these other WoW private servers, then they'd be paying for a sub. But I don't think that's necessarily the case because of the first half of this video, where we pointed out some of the big differences, in my opinion, between vanilla and today. And some of the reasons people don't like the game today. Because, hey, the world isn't as scary or challenging. Hey, LFG, easier mobs, and phasing, these quality of life changes to make the game easier, or quicker, less time consuming to play, ended up really sucking away a sense of server community. And yeah, and then there's the idea of flying mounts being not a good change, which is something that I agree with. So yeah, the game is different. And as a result, I don't think people would necessarily pay for it. These people who are playing this, I don't think they're a lost customer. In fact, Blizzard's talked about this before. They've actually specifically come out and stated, ultimately, this isn't an issue because of lost subscription fees from players choosing those illegitimate servers over the real WoW servers. It simply boils down to the fact that private servers are illegal. And that's that, he says as he crosses his arms and makes a frumpy face. You know who decides if private servers are illegal? Official Blizzard statement? You do. That's entirely up to your discretion. But I digress. They're a business, they're a company. They're here to make money. So in my opinion, this actually is an act of them grasping at straws. We've heard tales of, and we've seen numbers. Ever since Wrath of the Lich King, the subscriber count has gone down over time. There's always a peak when a new expansion comes out, but it's progressively been trending downward, which probably makes sense because it's an older game. But I kind of see this as a move of them trying to pull in as much as they can before this cash cow finally makes its way out to pastures one last time. This appears to be what that actually is. And it's not surprising because it is a business. They're not just a game company who makes games for the love of gaming. There's people there who certainly love games, but ultimately they're a business, and this vehicle for them to make money is that of creating games. But I think my biggest issue with this, today's WoW might as well be a completely different game from vanilla WoW. And they are not offering this experience for people who want it. I don't foresee them ever creating official vanilla servers. You wanna know why? That would basically be them admitting that the current game isn't good enough. That's what it would be. They'd be saying, hey, all these changes we made to WoW over the years, turns out we probably screwed up. Here's the vanilla WoW server. So I think the people who are looking for that experience, unfortunately enough, are never going to legally get it. And they are going to be put into a situation where they'll have to be breaking the terms of use and playing on these private servers. Now, Blizzard will continue to go after them and shut them down, undoubtedly, but I think that's really unfortunate. Because this is a situation where people are clearly yearning for this version of their product. And because it is a different game, it's not like playing WoW today, the updated version, will give them that same experience. You know, it's funny because I watched JonTron's video talking about this topic, and he made a great point. He said, it's if the maker of chess made a new version of chess, they called it Super Chess, and said you can never play old chess again. Chess is a classic game that people love for a very good reason. And any alterations that might come to a new variation of chess would make it a different game, and some people would probably want to play that original. In truth, if there's an updated version of chess, people could still play the original one. That's the chessboard they bought, that's the version of the game and the rules that they like. But with a living, breathing game like the World of Warcraft, when Blizzard decides these changes, you can't play them anymore, that's just how it is. And you have to quite literally go through illegal methods to play that game that you loved. And I guarantee some people would pay for that experience. But Blizzard isn't going to put up vanilla servers. Because again, that would just basically be admitting that they've screwed up in the past 10 years and every change they've made wasn't as good as their first iteration. And I don't even necessarily think that that's true. I think they've made a lot of great changes. And the game has improved in many ways. But it is, once more, different. And if people want to experience that, especially since they paid for it, most likely, I would imagine most people who are playing these vanilla servers had paid for and played the original game, I think they should have the option to do so. I just really don't see it happening, unfortunately. And that's really a sad thing. It's sad, maybe not for both parties. I mean, well, maybe it is sad for both parties. It's sad for the people who want to play the game, and it's probably sad for Blizzard to know that there's a bunch of people out there who think that their current game isn't good enough and wish that it was just like it was before. At the end of the day, Blizzard is totally within their rights. Everything they're doing is legally sound. In fact, the simple fact that they've allowed private servers to go on for this long has been like almost a generous gift from them, because they could have tried to shut this stuff down right from the get-go. But I think it's ultimately a very sad thing. There's people who want to play a game that they love, that they can't do it. And Blizzard, if they continue to go after all these private servers, they'll never be able to play it. And this also kind of wraps back around to the sense of games preservation. There are games that people paid for and played in the past that they really love, that they quite literally can't play today unless they take an illegal method. And that's too bad. I think that needs to change. Maybe in the future, with games like this, there are legacy servers for every patch. That if people liked an older version and they don't like the current version, they can play that older version. And maybe that becomes then a wake-up call for the developers that, hey, maybe some of these changes we made during this patch or this update or this expansion, if our player base is deciding not to take part in that, clearly these weren't good changes. This wasn't what the people who play this game want to experience. And while we entirely owe gratitude and appreciation to the people who make these experiences that we enjoy, I think we have to remember that they only are able to profit off this if we ultimately love these experiences. And if they make changes that we don't love, maybe they should listen. All right, guys, that is going to do it for me here today. Thank you so much for watching as we talk about Blizzard's shutdown of Nostalrius, the classic vanilla WoW server. Please, as always, be sure to leave your comments and thoughts in the comment section below. And until next time, I'll see you later.